All right. So, welcome everyone to today's Shelter in Studio visit. We are very excited to be hosting a longtime friend of the center and of myself, Julie Chen. Many of you probably know Julie, but if you don't, Julie Chen is an internationally known book artist who has been publishing limited edition artist books under the Flying Fish Press imprint for over 30 years. Her work can be found in numerous collections worldwide, including the Library of Congress, Washington, D.C., and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. She is a professor of book art at Mills College in Oakland, California. So with that, I will change the spotlight over to Julie and welcome Julie Chen.
Thanks, Chad. It's really nice to be here. Before I'm going to start sharing my screen as I'm talking, but before I was getting ready for this presentation, I was trying to remember if I've even been over the bridge since the first lockdown in March, and I don't think I have. So even though I can't be at the center, it's really nice to be part of a center event. So I really appreciate you and the San Francisco Center for the Book for inviting me to make this presentation for Shelter in Studio, because it's nice to be connected virtually with the center, even though none of us can actually, venture out to be there in person quite yet. So I'm going to start by showing my studio and then talking about some recent work and the project that I'm working on now. So let me go ahead and start with this. This is a shot of my house in Berkeley. So I only live about 12 miles from the Center for the Book, even though you have to cross the bridge that none of us really like to do. I've lived in this house for 35 years, and I've always had my studio in this house from the time I got my first Vandercook back in the 1980s. So the heavy equipment all lives in the garage, which is attached to the house, and my other studio spaces have moved around inside the house over the years. And like a lot of people in the book arts, I have spent a lot of my time this past semester teaching online from my studio. So this summer, I figured out what I thought would work best for going between lecturing and demonstrating by showing my table. And I had Alan Hillesheim, who many of you know, woodworker and letterpress printer in the East Bay, make this stand for me so I could put my laptop on top of my document camera. And because I needed enough table space to demonstrate, how to do binding, I had to raise up the document camera, which means I also had to raise myself up because, I'm only 5 feet tall on a good day. So there you see me standing on a platform wearing my Birkenstocks, because you never see the bottom half when you're on Zoom. We'd never wear those to school in real life. But anyway, so that's been working out, and I have been teaching. I just finished the semester earlier this week of teaching online. So I'm going to make a little plug for my school before I show you my studio. I teach at Mills College, and we have a wonderful MFA program in book art, if I do say so myself. And we are accepting applications for next fall. So if any of you or people you know are interested in getting a degree in book art, please contact us. And applications are due in February for the fall. So I'm going to start by showing my studio, which is in my house, as I said. And here is the bind. I have two different spaces in the house, and this is the bindery space. Here's a little video. The bindery is only 200 square feet, so I could have shown you the whole room in a photograph, but I thought, okay, I'll just make a little video because it's a little more fun than just showing you the space. So here I am going around. There's the closet. I use every possible space in the studio, and then as we turn, you'll see my document camera set up for teaching online. I've had to sort of give up this whole table in my studio for teaching online for the whole semester because it's too much trouble to move it around. So I'm looking forward to taking that down for a few weeks during winter break. And then as we turn the corner here, you'll see my other work table. I'm going to hone in on some of the toys and little tchotchkes that I keep in the studio. Even though I have very limited space, it brings me joy to have fun stuff in the studio with me, in addition to all the equipment. And then I also have a collection of fake food and miniature food that is sort of like the topic for a completely different talk. That's only a small portion of my collection. The rest of it is somewhere else in the house. And then you can see, the disorder of a working studio here. I cleaned up, but not completely. And then as we turn the corner, you can see more of, the stuff that's set up for the semester and little baskets. And then we will walk down this little hallway to my office. So I teach from the studio, but I do a lot of my office work, my digital design work from this little space. This is only 100 square feet, and out the window you can see a shed I had built a couple years ago in the backyard for book packaging. So all the packing materials live out in the shed, and I can go out there and pack up boxes. Although this year it's been kind of slim for book orders because a lot of the libraries had to suspend orders for a while. So that's my bindery and office. And then here is the garage with the heavy equipment. This is about 350 square feet. It's a one-car garage, but it's kind of long. So my whole studio space is around 650 square feet. And we're turning the corner here. You can see my laser cutter, which I've had for almost 20 years. It's a real champ and hasn't let me down once that whole time. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody about that later if you have questions about laser cutters. And then you can see some of my other equipment as we go along. My Vandercook is at the other end. Oh, there's the Kensol, of course. I have John Demerit to thank for that because, he's the king of Kensols and, kind of forced me to purchase one. But not from him, but, just told me I really needed to get a Kensol. Here's the university that I've had for almost 30 years. And then the board chair here. And then I have a lot of flat file storage because I do additions and I need to keep a lot of this stuff in drawers before they're completely bound. I have all the printed sheets in drawers. So I have 75 flat file drawers. I counted them up. So even though I have a small space, I have a lot of storage. And I would love to get more because I could always use more drawers, but I have no more space. So I think I'm maxed out on that. So I'm going to show you a few slides of my last book, which is called Wayfinding, which was published in 2019. I had it at the last Codex Book Fair. And after a number of false starts, this book ended up being about the differences in experience between physical learning and mental learning. And it consists of 4 trays that are hinged together. And when you open the first set of trays, it reveals 2 trays that contain 3-dimensional cast paper sheets, and then 2 booklets that are formatted as dragon scale bindings, which is the type of binding where the pages are staggered to reveal a continuous image that appears along the edges of the pages. And then a different continuous image will appear on the other side of the pages when you turn the pages. And then the piece opens up further to reveal another set of trays. This one has shows a series of alphabets that's based on flag semaphore, which is a type of gesture alphabet that has been used to convey messages across physical distances and mostly has been used in maritime communication. But it's also been used in mountainous areas where visual communication is still more practical and reliable than oral or electronic communication. Here is a shot of how I translated the semaphore alphabet into shapes and then into shapes with layers that could be translated on a CNC router into a mold for casting the paper pulp into sheets. So in this book, the alphabets were printed as diagrams, the semaphore diagrams, And then it's flat shapes with color layers to indicate the dimensionality of each shape. And then in this shot, it's shown next to the cast paper version of the same alphabet. And here's what the gradient file looks like to make one of the molds for the cast sheet that it's next to. And this particular cast sheet spells out the words texture and pattern if you read it in vertical columns. And here's a shot of a couple of shots of the CNC router at Logos Graphics in San Francisco carving out the molds for the paper casting. And the molds are cut out of rigid foam insulation. And I want to give a special shout out to John Sullivan, who spent many, many hours with us trying to make sure that we could get these files cut correctly. It took a while for us to figure out how to talk to the software in his 3D software, because we were setting it up in Photoshop, but his software was interpreting our shapes differently. So we had to go back and forth across the bridge many times to get this right. So I owe a lot of this book, the success of this book, to John. And then here are a few shots of the paper casting process. And so here's one of the molds that's made out of the rigid foam insulation, and a shot of my studio assistant, Asa Nakata, patting paper pulp into the recesses in the mold. John also made my pulp, so he's got the formula for the exact pulp that we need for these castings. And then I would pick it up in San Francisco. We'd bring it here and color it according to our own, recipe. So the hands in these shots are Asa's hands, because she's become a paper casting expert from this project. So she has to pat all the pulp in, and then blot out the excess water, and then put in another layer of pulp to start making the back of the sheet, and then blot that again, and then put even more pulp over the top and blot that again. And this is just a quick overview of a process that takes about 45 minutes to cast one sheet. And that's partially because in order to get all the detail of all the shapes, she has to be very careful about patting in the pulp, or else when we pull it out, there'll be voids and bubbles left on the front side of the sheet. So after this is all done, we have to put it in a dry box for about 3 days before we can peel it out and see if the sheet was successful or not. So this is a short video of the sound of the paper, because this is a difference, a book about physical learning and mental learning. It was based on a series of conversations I had with my daughter Eleanor, who's now in her mid-30s, and it turns out that our way of learning is very different, which I didn't actually know until we started having these conversations. She's much more of a physical learner, and I'm much more of a mental learner. So she really likes texture, is really important to her in her way of learning, and also sound. So she asked if I could include paper that made sound as part of the piece, and I had never done that before. So I ended up having this paper made at the Morgan Paper Conservatory in Cleveland. And I asked them to make paper that would make a loud noise when it was turned. And this is a brief video that was made by the library staff of Louisiana State University to demonstrate the sound of the paper. And I was really happy about this because it doesn't say anywhere, oh, the paper is really loud. They just noticed it and decided it was noteworthy enough to make a video of. So hopefully you'll be able to hear this as we go. So wayfinding ended up being one of the most ambitious projects I've ever done. It all started out because Eleanor, my daughter, suggested that I try to make a book with texture, which I thought, okay, no problem. It turned out to be a really long and involved journey for me to do that. So now I'm going to talk about what I'm working on now. This is not what I'm working on now, but this is sort of the introduction to what I'm working on now. So this past March, during my introduction to book art class, we had just finished printing this image of Ruth Bader Ginsburg when my school announced that we would be finishing the semester online. And my students never got to print the Ginsberg quotes that they hand set in metal type to go with this image, because we never went back to the studio after that day. And they actually made the announcement about going online while we were printing this, during my class. But I'm going to show a brief overview of how this process is done to make a pressure print portrait of a person's, from a photographic portrait. And this is a process I learned from Barb Tettenbaum. I had learned about pressure printing from her at least 25 years ago. But this particular process of doing pressure prints from um, photographic portraits is new for me. And so I just learned about this from Barb last February. And I thought it was a really cool process to use with my students, but I had no idea how impactful it was going to end up being in my own creative practice until after the lockdown, several months later. So for the Ginsberg portrait, we started with her official Supreme Court portrait and then put it in Photoshop and remove the color. And then we had to up the contrast a little bit. So she looks a little bit zombie-ish in this black and white version, but we needed that contrast for the next step, which is to posterize the image in Photoshop. And for pressure printing, I find that 3 layers is about the right number. So we posterize it in 3 layers, white, gray, and black. And then for this portrait, I printed out 3 copies of the posterized image and we cut it with an X-Acto knife. So the image on the right, if you look really carefully, you can see the edges of the collage of the gray layer. So there's a backing sheet and then the gray layer cut out and then the black layer cut out on top of that and then glued together. So here's a shot of some of the details of the gray and black layer before they got collaged together. And then the block, the image is printed against a blank block that is inked up in whatever color you choose. And in this case, my students chose a blue color for the Ginsberg portrait. And you'll see in a minute, I also chose a blue shade for the project I'm working on now. So anyway, in late spring, after the beginning of the lockdown, I made a plan to do a collaborative project with Carrie Michelani Schroeder, who is a book artist and a friend who lives in San Antonio, Texas. She was also a former MFA student of mine and worked as my studio assistant for several years. We chose our theme. We chose a theme of time for this book. And it was clear that the pandemic experience was going to play a leading role in our book because our perception of time had shifted in ways, as everyone else's has, in ways that no one could have imagined in earlier times. And so as the months wore on, the isolation from friends and family really started to take a toll on me. And I recalled that portrait I had made with my students of Ruth Bader Ginsburg back in March, and decided that I would make portraits of all my friends and family as a way to see them on my screen and later on paper when I couldn't actually see them in person. So I used a slightly expanded process to make all the portraits for the book. So instead of hand cutting it, we're going to cut it with a laser cutter. So here's the process I used, and a lot of you may recognize Alan Hillesheim, who's a friend of mine and a frequent instructor at the center. And so I asked all my friends to take selfies of themselves with and without a face covering. And so here's a pictures of Alan with and without his mask on. And then from there, we posterized the image. And this is my studio assistant, Asa Nakata, and Connie Lee really helped work on this from home for this project. So neither of them have been able to come back to work because in person, because my studio is so small, there's no way we can social distance. So they did a lot of this work from home. And so after the posterization, which is the same thing we did with the Ginsberg, I had them do digital line drawings from the posterization because the laser cutter needs those vector line drawings in order to cut. So we went from the 3 layers of the posterization to the line drawings in 2 layers, the red layer and the black layer, just so that we could get the gray and the black cut, and the white will be the background. And then here's a an example of when you take the digital drawing and put color back into it to see, to make sure that all the details are there. This is not actually getting printed. This is just a double check of the line drawing to make sure it's working. And then I'm going to make a paper collage out of this drawing. But I kind of like the grayscale version of people because it kind of gives them a superhero kind of graphic novel look, which is kind of fun to see all your friends and family in that format. So here's one other version, and many of you may recognize Sandra Krupa, who's the book art curator at the University of Washington in Seattle. And here's her one of her selfies and her posterized image. And then the line drawing that Asa Nakata and Connie Lee, one of them, they've divided up all the portraits. So one of them did this portrait drawing of Sandra. And then here's her grayscale version as well. So I'm showing you these two people, the portrait of these two people, because they get printed together on one sheet for the book. And for reasons that are too complicated to explain, the portraits that get printed next to each other will not show next to each other in the finished book. And even though they get printed upside down to each other, they will all appear right side up in the end. But it's like, I'm not like ready to talk about the structure yet, but it all works out. It's a crazy pagination situation for this structure. So that was their gray line, their line drawings, and then we separate that into the gray layer and the black layer from that line drawing. And then here is a little video of the laser cutter printing out or cutting out the gray layer of Sandra and Alan's portraits. It's speeded way up, but even at normal speed, it goes pretty fast. But it's sort of like a little too slow for this presentation. So I'm going to show you the speeded up version, but you can see that the laser cutter really does keep all the details that are in the vector line drawing. So you can see all the little hairs and little details in the mask get put in. So, and then here's an even shorter video showing the black. There's fewer details in the black, so that goes a little quicker. Again, this is speeded way up, so it doesn't go quite this fast, but it goes pretty fast. I guess there are still a lot of details that get cut out in the black for the mask. Cassandra was wearing a floral mask, and we try to capture, the sort of essence of the detail in people's portraits, but because it's going through so many different processes to get to the final version, we don't keep every single detail. So at this point, here's the gray cutout. You can sort of a little closer. You can see how the little lines where the paper is cut. Here's the black with the cuts. And then I have to remove all the parts that don't get kept in the for the plate, for the collage plate. So here I am removing part of that. And then here's a shot of the gray layer and then the black layer over it with the mask detail. You can see, I just like to show that all those little cutouts. I have to set the cutter so that everything doesn't fall out immediately, because I need to slide out all the pieces from the cutter in one piece, because I don't know when I'm looking at the cutter which piece I need to keep and which pieces get discarded. So so then I have to poke a lot of these holes out using a little tool just to get it to come out. And then here's what the plate looks like when it's completely glued together. There's dry mount adhesive on the back before it gets cut. So then once everything's in place, I can stick it back in the dry mount and glue everything together. And then here is the pressure print that's the result of that plate. And then here's another version of them the other way up. So now Sandra's upside down and Alan is right side up. And then here are the portraits of the same two people, but in their other versions. So now Alan's wearing a mask and Sandra doesn't have her mask on. So I'm going to show you some of the other portraits really quickly from the book that I've printed half of them so far, and I still have half to go. But one of the unintended consequences of this process is the amount of time I get to spend looking at my loved ones' faces. So my studio assistants, as I said, did all the initial drawings, which took them between 4 and 6 hours per portrait. But I've had to go back in and adjust each drawing for the cutter, which allows me to spend an additional 2 to 3 hours staring at each person's portrait, usually very close up. While it's not anything like seeing the person in person, it's given me a surprisingly deep sense of connection to the people in my life at a time when we can only look at each other from afar. And this, I really had no idea this was going to happen, when I started. So I'm going to be doing a total of 52 portraits for this book. And these are just the first half that have been finished. I'm going to, now that it's winter break from school, I'll be starting to adjust and make the plates for the second half of the portraits. And so one of the other unexpected aspects of making these portraits is that I've had a very hard time throwing away all the parts that aren't being used in the pressure plates, because I can still recognize the faces of my loved ones, even in these partial pieces. And it's been a very interesting experience that I didn't expect a lot of this to happen. So I'm keeping them for now. And I don't know if I'll do anything with them in a future project or just keep them, but I can't quite bring myself to throw them in the trash, even though these are the parts that don't get used in the final book. So I'm going to end my presentation by just showing a really brief video of a couple of the pressure prints being printed. As you can see, on the bed of the press is just blank blocks, solid blocks. You can sort of see a little shadow of the portrait, but it's not actually impressed in the block. It's just from the ink that's being left in the block from the pressure plate. The pressure plate is actually taped to the cylinder. It's behind the paper that's being printed. And if you keep your eye on the cylinder as it rolls forward after the paper's taken off, you can sort of see little details of the plate there. So I'm going to just do this. It's only a few seconds long. If you look at the cylinder, you can sort of see the plate that's attached to the cylinder. And then I'll show you. There's the so that's it for me. So if anybody has any questions, I hopefully didn't run. Oh, I kind of ran right to the end, Chad. So
That's okay. It was wonderful. Well, not a ton of questions. One question was, you kind of alluded to it, but what was the fiber used for the cast paper?
It's cotton. So it's a cotton, and there's methylcellulose added to it while it's being beaten, so that when it's dry, it's really hard, because I really want people to be able to touch it, when they're reading it. That was part of the important thing about the texture. So I didn't want it to pill up or collapse or anything. So it's really sturdy paper.
Well, that was really an amazing presentation, and great to see both the wayfinding project and the new project that you're, one of the ideas of this whole series is to see what people are doing with the time. So it's great to see that the silhouettes project. I guess my only question on the silhouettes project was answered by that video. They just get one pass, even though there's the two layers.
There's only one pass. Yeah, so everywhere where there's 2 layers of paper, it hits the block a little harder, so it's a little darker. Right. So it's kind of an amazing, you get an amazing amount of detail with the pressure print process, which I've always known, but I don't know, somehow going from a photograph has been very, it kind of bumps up the level of what you can do with pressure printing for my toolbox anyway. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and giving us this wonderful presentation. But since we have gone to just a little after 1, I'm going to go ahead and let it go. But lots of people are saying thank you. And if you have specific questions, can people reach out to you? Just find you on your website? Yeah, so my website is flyingfishpress.com. If you have any questions for me, feel free to email me about that. So thank you again, Chad. It's been my pleasure to be part of Shelter in Studio.
Oh, we're so glad to have you, and thank you everyone for coming. Hope you all have a great, safe rest of your week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week. We just have a couple more for the rest of the year, so we'll look forward to seeing you next week. All right. Have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.